after 8 o'clock at night. They are really serious about their Sabbath. We'll talk about that later. But there's this kind of like that millennials aren't driven with the same kind of perhaps productivity commitment that other generations were, and it's never done. I've never heard it brought up in a positive light. It's always been as a challenge, as a problem. That's lots of skills, lots of gifts, and there's this other side. How about this one? How often have you come up to somebody and said, "So, Dick, how are you? How's life? How's it going?" And you say,
Wonder if you want.
good answers. He's not a plant, obviously. But yeah, I mean, how often do we hear as a response to that some version of, "Oh, great, but I am so busy." Or just forget the great part, just "I'm busy." Or "I'm swamped." Or they just do a kind of like body thing. You don't even have to tell you. Do you hear that a lot? Do you say that a lot?
Yeah.
When we say that, or when we hear people say that, what's the message there? I'd love to get together with lunch, but you know what? I'm going to have to get back to you. I am so busy these days. You're not, obviously. Is there any sense of equating busyness with success?
I think yes, in the corporate world, many people they look at their schedules and they're going.
They're going a mile a minute.
Mile a minute, and I just looking at my colleagues over the years, the ones that had the most frantic schedules were usually the people in charge that were just taking on enormous responsibilities, not only at work, but also professionally in the trade associations and stuff. And it was just kind of remarkable just to watch them in action. But they were, interesting enough, an informal survey, a lot of them were like President Clinton, 4-hour sleepers. And that's an incredible, so I kind of figured this out. So the people that have an incredible physical stamina and could go much more than those of us that need 8 hours sleep a night. And it was fascinating, but I saw that the people, like Henry Kissinger's another one, people at the very top, they're those people, that small gifted group that have a genetic gift of 4 hours sleep and they can function on it. And over a lifetime, they can handle a lot more responsibility.
And we equate people like that as uniquely gifted.
Yeah, it's a genetic
Wow, I wish I could
gift.
do that.
It's a genetic gift not to need all this.
Okay, so in the corporate world, what about in families?
It's like, I'm needed, I'm wanted, I'm so busy.
Yeah.
It's like their self-esteem. So I think it's where.
Where are the families this morning, by the way? We do the forum every Sunday at 9. Where's the young families?
Trying to get their kids in.
Getting ready, getting
say
the
I know,
children ready
right?
to come here.
Maybe I just know, a lot more poor people or something, but, they're busy because they're working 3 jobs just to pay their bills. And they don't equate that with success.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And there's a lot more of us poor people working our butts off and not feeling very successful in anything.
Exactly, and that's a really good point, because there is a certain, I think, class or something, demarcation here about the busyness thing. That there is, and cultural. Europe looks at being busy very differently. And historically, we looked at busy very differently. That was not a sign of success, that was a sign of non-success. Leisure was the thing you associated with success. And so let's look at a study that this was done. This was a study done by, it was, I think, Columbia, Harvard, and one other university combined, and it was called Conspicuous Consumption of Time When Busyness and Lack of Leisure Time Becomes a Status Symbol. So, to your point, Jim. They found overwhelmingly that we saw it as a sign of success in the United States, not in Europe. that it has, to some of the points you made, it makes you feel as though you have a sense of drive and ambition, that you are in demand. It's sort of, we complain about our busyness to people, but there's studies found that it's also, at the same moment, kind of a bragging. It's kind of a backhanded compliment to themselves. And, by the way, a backhanded comment about the person you're speaking with. I'm really busy, and fortunately, I just don't have time for you. Yeah?
In the European culture, they have the very strong tradition of taking the whole month of August off.
No.
And because of that, law firms in Europe ran into this all the time. The American partners would come over to Paris or London, and they'd be on their 7 days a week work schedule. The Europeans would look at them in horror, like, it's crazy, we take our weekends off. So there was a cultural clash between the American lawyers and US culture and European lawyers and European culture puts a lot more emphasis still on family and taking those long vacations and the 3-day weekends for all the religious holidays. I mean, the whole, Portugal, the whole country shuts down and not on the whole, including Monday, like everything just
It's
shuts
totally
down.
different culturally, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're here for the part, but to this day, the United States is the only industrialized country that doesn't mandate that type of paid holiday. Europe does. This is, to your point about this business of bragging and status and such, it is contextual too, right? To colleagues perhaps, corporate, lawyers might do that with each other, clergy I hear all the time. But what if you were to say that to your mom? It doesn't take on that same connotation, She's gonna say, well, what's going on? You gotta slow down, honey, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's not a one size
Or your kids.
fits all. Yeah.
You're not at my softball game.
How about the expression, keep busy and you'll stay out of trouble? Certainly kids of my generation heard that from our parents all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, or how about another one I've heard is, if you want something done, give it to a busy person.
Yes.
Yep.
They sleep 4 hours a day, they've got a special gene, they get things done. They're super people.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Father Chris, so I'm curious about that last comment about the genes. So I do wonder if maybe there's different kinds of sense of fulfillment that people have, so that maybe a single kind of vision of either a binary vision, may not fit the way we're all called to be. So perhaps there are people who, in order to be fully who they've been created to be, have this gift of being able to rest and to be fully present in the moment and to just find joy right there. And then there are those who their joy is found in thinking about things that are 4 weeks away and planning it. And I'm just wondering if maybe there's hope for everybody to live into your own skin, as opposed to being someone who you may not be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in other words, is workaholism perhaps a gift from God? I mean, I'm taking the extreme version of what you just said, but you know what I mean? Right?
Yeah.
You could try to make the case that God's wired me this way. I'm a type A doer. I don't need much sleep, and I'm going for it every day. And my kids have wonderful daycare, and I'm married to somebody who doesn't need to see me that often, and it works for me,
Yeah, that 4-hour sleeper thing, I guess I'm just making the point, there's a very, 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 very small percentage of people that can actually do that.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch more people who think they can do that. Complete disaster, trying to.
Yeah.
I've met very few people who can do that and really function well. They try, as you said, and they're a hot mess.
They're a hot mess. I've seen little strategies for like trying to catch up with those folks. Little power naps, do a 20-minute thing, and here it's all you need is only 20 minutes. It won't take that much out of your production day. But do that 20 minutes, and then you can keep up with those characters maybe. So yeah, so what drives this kind of, to the extent we do put busyness on a kind of cultural pedestal. What drives that, you know, beyond what we just looked at in terms of status. I hear this from parents all the time. It's a keeping up with the Joneses. It's like kids. I don't know about you, if you guys know that. Check in with kids, like how busy their schedule is today. It is insane, the stuff I hear. 4 things in one day sometimes. 4 things in one day. I did swim team for a little while. Did karate. That was it. My parents never came to my school. They didn't, you know, I don't think my dad knew where one of mine was for a while. You know, today's it's wildly different. I've asked parents, you know, what's going on with that? Is that you that's coming up with all this? And they all say the same thing. They all said, oh yeah, I was nowhere near as busy as my kids when I was a kid. They all say the same thing. So I was asking them, so then what's driving this? And they all say, well, we got to keep up with everybody else. It's what everyone else is doing. It's good for them. They like it. And it's good for their resume and getting into college one day and all that stuff. By the way, what's going on with the teen suicide rate? Anybody know about that?
Going up.
Doubled in the last 20 years.
Isn't some of that attributed to being in this internet world with all this other stuff going on and the technology?
Yeah, we made keeping up with the Joneses really hard now because we have social media everywhere where the Joneses are looking better than ever, right? Because we only post our best hits, our greatest hits. And so it's keeping up with the Joneses, competition, you know, that's what we do as human beings. We understand our status, our success, where we land in the tribe based on what is everyone else doing. That's just human nature to a certain degree. And so social media has turned that up to a 1,000-fold, you know? And it's all fake, right? We create these fake digital avatars that have very little to do with our real life. And yet, kids don't get that. They think it's real. And they got to keep up. I mean, that would be a whole other class, but I think that's a huge piece. The fact that teen suicide is twice what it was 20 years ago, and that we're not talking about that very much, that to me strikes me as a huge epidemic that we're like, I don't know why we're not talking about that.
And what else has happened in the last 20 years? We've got our devices, and all the first generation of kids is on devices all the time.
Yeah.
And it's 20 years is about the same period of time. Maybe the real gift of God is being able to learn to slow down and be who you are and be okay with who you are, not.
Yeah.
And learn not to go to the Joneses.
Right, and not to do a photoshopped. I mean, I see this too more and more times. Not to beat up on millennials again, but all of my in-laws who are in that age range, it's very rare for them to actually post a real picture of themselves nowadays. It is always heavily doctored up. You know, it is not just airbrushed. I'm talking. They put all kinds of stuff, and you can barely recognize it by the time it's over with. Yeah, so there's a lot of pride and ego beyond it. You know, these are just things I picked up. If you have anything, I think there's a huge. I think this social media thing has propelled this real fear of missing out. A fear of, I need to do all these things. I need to show up because I don't want to be the one that doesn't. I don't want to miss out on the crowd. I think it's turned that, again, I think that's probably something that's always been there, but I think social media and digital communications has just cranked that up 1,000-fold. Because now we know about even more things we might miss out on. You know?
But this is a largely raised expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, people used to be happy with bread and butter for supper. Now they've got to have
Yeah.
a fancy meal.
Right.
Fancy meal takes more time to cook
Yeah.
than bread and butter.
Yeah, I mean, you can summarize all these just by the word insecure. I mean, if the person is insecure, then all this stuff is gonna gnaw at them and be what they seem like they feel like they need to do to be worthwhile.
Mhm.
I guess my proposition is you secure people don't measure themselves by what's being presented.
Worse from
on
that.
social media. They know themselves and they can do themselves.
I know, with my son, I even in high school, I would tell him, I said, I hope you have enough time to be bored. You know, I really want you to take time to be bored.
Mhm.
you know, I say bored,
Yeah.
just take time to be bored, but, you know, and I feed him that, but
Right. But everyone else,
society,
dumps.
everything else comes at
The
you, what are
opposite.
you doing, you know, the relatives, you know, what's he doing, what's his, you know, constant at him.
For those who are here, when we did the chapter she did on, whatever it was, I can't remember the contradiction, but it was like the abundance of less or something, where we talked about, you know, consumption and all that. It's really the same dynamic in many ways. It's the same dynamic. Filling the needs we have, the emotional needs we have, we all have them, with, in that case, products. In this case, keeping busy, being involved, and hopefully that somehow it's going to rub off on us. That busyness, it'll just rub off somehow, and we'll find fulfillment.
I'm thinking that, you know, we're stuck with social media, so part of my hope as a Christian is to develop the disciplines and the habits that I need in order to thrive, right? And also share with my fellow brothers and sisters. So one of the things I've been thinking about is that there really isn't anything new under the sun. So I get that social media is brand new, but I think it invokes in us the same problems that humans have had over centuries, which is envy,
Yeah.
right?
Or
You know, yeah. So you know, insecurity and all of those things. So in some ways, you know, maybe recognizing that in yourself, and then using the tools that we've been given as Christians. And one of the things that I find myself doing, because like, you know, I'll end up on Facebook and I'll be like, oh my God, that was so smart and pithy what they just wrote. Why don't I think like that, right? And then I catch myself, just like any other way of sort of developing new habit. You recognize where you fall short, and then you say, well, what's another way I could be? And what I find myself doing is, instead of, you know, having my first event, and then the second event is, I rejoice that they are this way. And I celebrate that they're so much more creative and wonderful, and that they're experiencing it. So removing that place where I degrade them and myself, and instead feeling free to be in the place where we're the beloved community. It's the one body, and we're all different members of it with different gifts. Does that make any sense?
Sure, yeah.
I think I need help to practice that way of being.
So the church, yeah, right, and the church, we actually build that into our calendar, don't we? We have a whole season called the Lent, where we are called to that type of self-reflection, to practice mindfulness, to practice slowing down long enough before we get caught up in the routine or caught up in what everyone else is doing, to say, do I really need to do that? What's really going on there? What's going on within myself that causes me to want to say yes, but am I trying to please others, all that kind of stuff? And slowing down and being mindful and choosing a different response. You know, I'm gonna decide, you know what, okay, God was right, Jesus is right, there is good news in this world, I am enough, I'm loved as I am. I don't need to buy this stuff, I don't need to join all those things, I don't need to show up at every event to be okay, to be accepted, to be loved, I don't need all those things. You know, that's the good news. That's the good news, and we have to continually be reminded of it, because, as you said, the world, the culture, everybody is constantly trying to pull us out of that. And that's what Christian community is about, right? Because we have to encourage and remind each other, say, Dick, what are you doing? You're driving yourself crazy. You're supposed to be retired. Why are you showing up at all this stuff?
That's the right thing to do.
Right thing to do, yeah. Obligation, that's a lovely one, isn't it? We love that one. Guilt. We never trade in that in the church, do we? And then last one I want to mention is this fear of stillness. We're driven by our business by just a fear of stillness. Do we have an inner idea that, you know what? Maybe if I'm not in demand, you know, what's left? And I just came across this really interesting study that was mentioned in a TED Talk. University of Virginia and Harvard did a series of studies, asked people to simply sit in a room alone for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, somewhere in there. Be alone without your phone, just to think, just to ponder, just to daydream. And they were offered the option, if they chose, they could administer an electric shock to themselves. And 60% preferred to shock themselves than to sit in a room for 5 minutes or 12 or 15 or whatever it was. And by the way, men were more like 80%. Women were somewhere like 25. So men were even way worse at this than women, for whatever reason. That's another topic, right? That'll be another forum. But this idea that just being able to sit for 5 or 15 minutes, does anybody have a practice at home? Or during your week to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You try to do it every day?
Meditation. I don't do it every day, but that would be ideal, but
Yeah.
I do 3 days a week, that's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Senator Lieberman wrote a wonderful book about keeping the Sabbath in a more traditional way, and he did it even as a senator. And he literally, Friday night, walked home from Capitol Hill to Georgetown with Secret Service. And the only thing he showed up for on Saturday, the only exception was if there was a major Senate vote on Saturday, the rabbi gave him dispensation to vote. But other than that, his entire life, he kept the Sabbath with his family. And he attributes that keeping the Sabbath to a lot of his personal family strength, from really focusing on his family that one day, no matter what. And he just enforced it. And he was an amazing example of that. But the book I recommend, it's a very excellent, he wrote it a few years back, but it's excellent book.
Yeah, so let's talk about Sabbath, because that's really I think, a Christian response, one important Christian response to this culture. And I just threw up a couple of things. This is an interesting factoid pertinent to Michigan. I discovered in the research that Henry Ford actually was very much responsible for moving us to a 40-hour workday. In the late 20s, it was at 48 hours, 6 days a week. And he discovered through experimentation that his workers were more productive at 40 hours a week. And so he cut it back to 5 days a week. And it's kind of been with us ever since. And that goes to Joan's point. She also quotes Thomas Aquinas that it's requisite for the relaxation of the mind that we make use from time to time of playful deeds and jokes. I was invited to a game of what was it? What was that game at your house?
Oh, euchre.
Euchre. And I couldn't make it because I was busy, right? But everybody talked about it the next week. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I could just hear it in their voice. I really missed out on that. I can tell you, I don't remember what I was doing instead. And I look back and but I remember people talking about how much fun it was. And I'm wondering if I made the wrong choice. How are we at doing playful deeds and jokes and just being free play, as we call it with kids, free play? I'm really blessed having the twins because when I'm with them, I've got no choice but to engage in free play. I'm down on my knees doing stuff, feeling like a kid again, and it's actually really wonderful, It is really wonderful. Do we do that as adults? Is it hard? Feel silly? Games are really making a comeback, I've noticed, in dinner parties and stuff. We go to more dinner parties now where people are doing games as a kind of follow-up.
I think that's a shortcoming. They're no longer comfortable with just plain conversation. So they want to keep busy playing games.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yes. If it's an avoidance thing, then there's always gotta double check everything. Scratch the surface for sure. Can we imagine we all just engaged in contemplative sort of presence, and we all just sort of have finished dinner and just sat and just said, we're going to be with each other.
It's not like take the electric shock.
Yeah. Exactly. No, I think that was the point of the study. We would get me out of here. I love this one from George Bernard Shaw. We don't stop playing because we grow old because we stop playing. Lovely wisdom. So let's do some Bible here. What time is it?
9:44.
How much time we got?
You have 1 minute.
I thought this was a 10.
Overtime already.
Oh my God. We got to do a part 2. Should we do part 2 on the Sabbath next week?
Sure.
Is that possible?
Sure, let's say yes.
I have all this great
Yes,
stuff
yes.
from Walter Brueggemann, and you can't do him in 1 minute. Trust me.
No, yeah. Resist.
We'll do part 2 next week.
Resist.
All right, I'm gonna resist, yes, I'm gonna resist the urge to be perfectionistic here. So I've set up the problem. So next week, maybe we can check in about the solution, about Sabbath, and how do we do free play? And what is Sabbath beyond simply a commandment not to work? What is the positive theology that's being offered with the Sabbath? It's not just a prohibition to work, as we'll see, that it's a call to something bigger. And it's not just about one day a week. That's my tease. All right, see you next week.